The sun sank low over the horizon, its dying light casting long shadows across Timber Creek, a small frontier town nestled in the heart of Wyoming Territory in 1876. Lucille Andrews clutched the telegram in her trembling hands, the paper crumpled from being read countless times since its arrival that morning. Her father was dead, leaving behind a mountain of debt and their modest ranch now in the hands of his business partner, Vernon Caldwell. Wind whipped at Lucille's skirts as she hurried down the town's main street. At 22, she had grown up believing in her father's dreams of prosperity, only to discover upon his death that he'd mortgaged everything to Caldwell, a man whose cold eyes had followed her since she was 16. "Miss Andrews," called a familiar voice. Lucille turned to see Sheriff Thomas Riley, his weathered face creased with concern. "I heard about your father. My condolences." "Thank you, Sheriff," she replied, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "I'm just trying to make sense of everything." "I'd be careful around Caldwell if I were you," the sheriff warned, lowering his voice. "He's not known for his generosity when it comes to debts." Lucille nodded, though the sheriff's warning only confirmed her fears. She continued toward the bank where Caldwell kept an office above the main floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. The bank clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, eyed her with pity. "Mr. Caldwell is expecting you, Miss Andrews." Top of the stairs, first door on the right. Vernon Caldwell sat behind a massive oak desk, smoke from his cigar curling toward the ceiling. At 45, he had a reputation as a shrewd businessman who'd acquired half the properties in Timber Creek through loans that seemed generous until the terms came due. "Ah, Lucille," he said, not bothering to stand. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss about your father's." Financial indiscretions. Lucille remained standing. "My father was an honest man." Caldwell laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Honest men don't die owing $3,000. Your father mortgaged everything, the ranch, the cattle, even the house to fund his foolish search for gold in them hills." "There must be some arrangement we can come to," Lucille said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I can work, pay back the debt over time." Caldwell's eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "There is one arrangement that might satisfy me," he said, standing and moving around the desk. "A young, pretty wife would certainly improve my standing in the community." "Your father's debt would vanish and you'd want for nothing." Lucille stepped back, disgust rising in her throat. "I would rather live in poverty than marry you, Mr. Caldwell." His smile faltered, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Think carefully, girl. Without my generosity, you'll be homeless by sunrise. I'm giving you until tomorrow to reconsider. The smart choice should be obvious." Lucille fled from the bank, tears blurring her vision. She had nowhere to turn, no family to rely on. Her mother had died of fever when Lucille was just 14, and her father had raised her alone, teaching her to ride, shoot, and manage the ranch alongside him. Skills that would amount to nothing if Caldwell took everything. As dusk settled over Timber Creek, Lucille returned to the ranch that had been her home for all her life. The small two-bedroom house stood adjacent to the barn where they kept their horses and stored feed for the winter. She wandered through each room, touching familiar objects, memories flooding her mind. In her father's study, she found his account books and began poring through them, desperate to understand how they'd come to this. The entries confirmed Caldwell's claims her father had borrowed heavily, convinced that his prospecting would yield enough gold to repay the loans tenfold. A knock at the door startled her. She approached cautiously, grabbing her father's shotgun from beside the fireplace. "Who's there?" "It's me, Riley," came the sheriff's voice. "Mind if I come in?" Lucille opened the door, relaxing slightly at the familiar face. The sheriff removed his hat as he stepped inside. "I've been doing some checking, Lucille. Caldwell's claim on your property is legal, but there's something not right about how quickly he moved on your father's death, almost as if he was waiting for it." "What are you saying?" Lucille asked, setting the shotgun aside. Sheriff Riley shook his head. "I'm not saying anything definite. Just that your father's accident at the mine seems convenient, but without evidence there's nothing I can do." "He asked me to marry him," Lucille said flatly. "Said it would erase the debt. The sheriff's expression darkened. That man has always had his eye on you, and not in a gentlemanly way. What did you tell him? I refused. He's given me until tomorrow to reconsider. Riley nodded grimly. I suspected as much. Listen, I can't interfere with legal business matters, but I can offer advice. There's a ranch about 20 miles north of here. Man named Samuel Fletcher owns it. Came from back east about 5 years ago. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's honest. He might need help with the spring cattle drive. If you can make it there, it might buy you some time to figure things out. Hope fluttered in Lucille's chest. Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate your help. After Riley left, Lucille packed quickly, gathering essential clothing, her mother's locket, and what little money she could find. She saddled her mare, Penny, and led her quietly from the stable. With one last glance at the only home she'd ever known, Lucille Andrews rode into the night, determined to reach Samuel Fletcher's ranch before Caldwell discovered she was gone. Dawn was breaking when Lucille spotted smoke rising from a chimney in the distance. The Fletcher ranch was modest compared to some she'd seen, but the corrals were well maintained and healthy cattle grazed in the surrounding pastures. As she approached the main house, a tall figure emerged from the barn, a saddle slung over his shoulder. Samuel Fletcher was nothing like she'd imagined. In his early 30s, he had a lean, muscular build from years of hard work. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw partly hidden beneath a neatly trimmed beard. What struck Lucille most were his eyes, a startling blue that reminded her of summer skies. "Can I help you, miss?" he called out, setting the saddle down on a fence post. Lucille dismounted, her legs stiff from the long ride. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm Lucille Andrews from Timber Creek. Sheriff Riley suggested I might find work here." Sam studied her for a moment, taking in her travel-worn appearance and the determination in her eyes. "Riley sent you, did he? Must be a good reason. Come inside, Miss Andrews. You look like you could use some coffee and a hot meal." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable. A fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a kitchen area occupying another. Bookshelves lined a third wall, filled with volumes that surprised Lucille: philosophy, history, literature. "You're educated," she said without thinking. Sam smiled as he put a pot of coffee on the stove. "Yale University, though my father nearly disowned me when I decided to come west instead of joining the family banking business." "What brought you here?" Lucille asked, warming her hands by the fire. "Freedom," he answered simply. "In Boston, your worth is measured by your name and connections. Out here, it's what you can do that matters." He gestured for her to sit at the table. "Now, why don't you tell me why Riley sent you my way? He's not usually in the business of finding ranch hands." Lucille hesitated, then decided honesty was her best approach. She told Sam everything: her father's death, Caldwell's ultimatum, her desperate flight from Timber Creek. Sam listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she described Caldwell's proposal. When she finished, he poured her more coffee before speaking. "I know Caldwell by reputation. He's bought up half the territory through methods that skirt the law but never quite break it." "I have nowhere else to go," Lucille admitted. "At least for now. I can work hard, Mr. Fletcher. I grew up on a ranch. I can ride, mend fences, even help with calving if needed." "Sam," he corrected, "if you're going to work here, you might as well use my name." He considered for a moment. "I've been meaning to hire help for the spring drive, and my housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing sister. There's a small cabin behind the main house where you can stay. It's not much, but it's private." Relief washed over Lucille. "Thank you, Sam. I promise I won't be a burden." "I don't take charity cases, Miss Andrews. If you work here, you'll earn your keep, and call me Sam, please." "Then you should call me Lucille." For the first time since her father died, Lucille felt a glimmer of hope. She had a temporary refuge, time to plan her next move. What she didn't realize was how quickly Vernon Caldwell would discover her whereabouts, or how far he would go to claim what he believed was rightfully his. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm of hard work and gradually easing tension. Sam showed Lucille around the ranch, impressed by her knowledge and willingness to tackle any task. She cooked meals, mended clothing, and helped with the daily chores of ranch life. In the evenings, they often sat by the fire. Sam reading aloud from his collection of books while Lucille listened, occasionally asking questions that revealed her quick mind and curiosity about the world beyond Wyoming Territory. Spring brought longer days and the beginning of calving season. Lucille proved her worth during these critical weeks, spending nights in the barn with laboring cows and helping deliver calves alongside Sam. One particular night, after successfully helping a heifer deliver twins, they shared a moment of triumph that lingered between them. "You've got a natural touch," Sam said, watching Lucille guide the second calf toward its mother's teat. "Most greenhorns I've hired can't handle calving season." Lucille smiled, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling in her expression. "My father believed women were just as capable as men when it came to ranch work. He taught me everything he knew." Sam handed her a canteen of water. "He must have been quite a man." "He was," she said softly, memories flooding back. "Stubborn as a mule sometimes, but fair and kind. He wanted more for me than Timber Creek could offer." "And what do you want, Lucille?" Sam asked, his voice quiet in the stillness of the barn. Before she could answer, a commotion outside drew their attention. Sam's foreman, Jake Miller, burst through the door. "Riders coming, boss." 6 of them, moving fast. Sam's expression hardened. "Get back to the house, Lucille. Use the rear entrance and stay out of sight." "Who is it?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Can't be sure, but not many people ride in a group that size at this hour with good intentions." He checked the revolver at his hip. "Go, now." Lucille hurried through the darkness toward the main house, her heart pounding. From her position at the back window, she could see Sam standing on the porch, illuminated by the lantern Jake held. The riders approached, dust billowing behind them in the moonlight. At their lead was a figure she recognized immediately: Vernon Caldwell. "Evening, Fletcher," Caldwell called out, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. "Seems you've taken something that belongs to me." Sam stood his ground, hands relaxed at his sides but never far from his weapon. "I don't recall stealing anything of yours, Caldwell. State your business and be on your way." Caldwell dismounted, his boots raising small clouds of dust as he approached the porch steps. "The Andrews girl." "She's here, isn't she? Ran off before settling her father's debts." "Any debts between you and Jacob Andrews died with him," Sam replied coolly. "Unless you have papers showing otherwise, I suggest you leave my property." "Oh, I have papers," Caldwell sneered, pulling documents from his coat. Loan agreements signed by Jacob Andrews, putting up everything he owned as collateral, his daughter included. Sam's voice was dangerously quiet. "A person can't be collateral, Caldwell. That kind of thinking went out with the war." "The girl owes me, Fletcher. One way or another, I'll collect what's mine." Caldwell gestured to his men. "Search the place." Sam drew his revolver with lightning speed, aiming it steadily at Caldwell's chest. "Take one step toward my house, and it'll be your last." The standoff stretched tense seconds into minutes. Finally, Caldwell stepped back. "This isn't over, Fletcher. The law's on my side." "We'll see about that," Sam replied. "Now get off my land." Lucille watched as Caldwell and his men rode away, their silhouettes disappearing into the darkness. When Sam entered the house, his face was grim. "He'll be back and with the sheriff next time. Those papers he's waving around might hold up in court." "What can I do?" Lucille asked, feeling the brief security of recent weeks slipping away. "I can't let him take the ranch my father built." Sam paced the room, thinking. "We need to see exactly what your father signed. There might be a loophole, something Caldwell overlooked." "The documents would be at the bank in Timber Creek," Lucille said, despair creeping into her voice. "I can't go back there. He'll be watching." "You don't have to." Sam's expression changed, determination replacing concern. "I'll go. I have business in town anyway, and Caldwell doesn't know me well enough to be suspicious." "It's too dangerous," Lucille protested. "If he realizes what you're doing, he won't," Sam assured her. "Trust me, Lucille. I didn't spend 4 years at Yale without learning how to navigate legal documents." He took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "I won't let him take what's yours." The next morning, Sam rode for Timber Creek, leaving Lucille with Jake and instructions to stay alert. The day passed agonizingly slowly as she tried to keep busy with ranch work, her mind constantly wandering to Sam and the danger he might be facing in town. It was nearly sunset when Lucille heard hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her at the sight of Sam riding toward the ranch, but it quickly turned to alarm when she noticed he was pushing his horse hard, glancing frequently over his shoulder. "Pack what you need," he said breathlessly as he dismounted. "Caldwell's gathered a posse. They're claiming I abducted you, using it as an excuse to come here in force. That's ridiculous. I came here of my own free will." It doesn't matter to him. He's convinced the town magistrate that you're being held against your will. Sam handed her a rolled document. "I managed to get a copy of your father's loan agreement. There's something strange about it. The signature doesn't match the other papers I found in the county records office." "You think it's forged?" Lucille asked, hope rising. "I'm not certain, but it's possible. We need time to prove it, though, and that's something we don't have right now." They worked quickly, gathering supplies and saddling fresh horses. Just as they were preparing to leave, the sound of approaching riders echoed through the valley. Sam's expression darkened. "They're here sooner than I expected. Jake, take Lucille through the North Pass. I'll hold them off and meet you at Miller's Creek." "No," Lucille protested. "I won't leave you to face them alone." "This isn't up for debate," Sam said firmly. "If Caldwell gets his hands on you, we lose any chance of fighting this legally. Go with Jake, please." The urgency in his voice convinced her. With a last, lingering look, Lucille mounted her horse and followed Jake toward the mountain trail that would lead them to safety. They had barely reached the edge of the property when shots rang out behind them. Lucille reined in her horse, turning back toward the sound. "Sam's in trouble. We have to help him." Jake grabbed her reins. "Sam can take care of himself. He ordered me to get you to safety, and that's what I'm going to do." More gunfire echoed across the valley, followed by shouts. Torn between safety and loyalty, Lucille made her decision. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said, yanking her reins free and spurring her horse back toward the ranch. The scene that greeted her was chaos. Caldwell's men had surrounded the main house, with Sam pinned down inside. Smoke was rising from one corner of the structure they had set fire to force him out. Lucille circled wide, approaching from behind the barn where she wouldn't be seen. Inside, she grabbed a rifle from the rack and loaded it with steady hands. Through the back window, she could see Sam crouched by the front door, exchanging fire with Caldwell's men. The flames were spreading rapidly, consuming the wooden structure with frightening speed. Taking a deep breath, Lucille fired 3 rapid shots into the air. The unexpected gunfire from a new direction caused confusion among Caldwell's men, some of them turning their attention toward the barn. In that moment of distraction, Sam made a dash for the cover of the well, narrowly avoiding bullets that kicked up dust at his heels. Caldwell's voice rose above the commotion. "Bring me the girl. Fletcher can burn with his house." 2 men approached the barn cautiously. Lucille retreated deeper into the shadows, heart pounding. When the first man stepped through the door, she swung the butt of the rifle, connecting with his temple. He dropped without a sound. The second man rushed in, only to find himself staring down the barrel of Lucille's weapon. "Drop your gun," she commanded, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The man hesitated, then complied, his revolver thudding to the dirt floor. "Caldwell will kill you for this," he warned. "Tie him up," said a voice behind her. Sam stood in the doorway, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead but otherwise unharmed. Relief washed over Lucille. "You're alive. Thanks to your diversion," he replied, quickly binding the man's hands with a length of rope. "But we need to move. The house is lost, and Caldwell's men are regrouping." They slipped out the back of the barn, staying low in the tall grass that bordered the property. Gunshots continued behind them as they made their way to where their horses waited in a small copse of trees. As they mounted, Lucille looked back at the burning house, flames now engulfing the structure completely. "I'm sorry about your home," she said softly. Sam's expression was grim but determined. "It's just a house. We're what matters now." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "We'll head for Fort Laramie. I have friends there who can help us build a case against Caldwell." They rode hard through the night, using the stars for navigation and stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and Caldwell's men, but Sam remained vigilant, constantly scanning their back trail for signs of pursuit. "We should reach Miller's Creek by midday," he said as they watered the horses at a small stream. Jake will meet us there with supplies. Lucille nodded, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. Do you think we can really prove the loan document was forged? It's our best chance, Sam replied. If we can convince a judge that Caldwell falsified your father's signature, it would invalidate his claim on the ranch. More importantly, it would expose him as a fraud to the entire territory. They reached Miller's Creek shortly after noon, finding Jake waiting as planned with fresh horses and provisions. After a brief rest, they continued their journey toward Fort Laramie, traveling through increasingly rugged terrain to avoid the main trails where Caldwell's men might be watching. As dusk approached on their second day of travel, they crested a ridge overlooking a small valley. Sam raised his hand, signaling for them to stop. Riders ahead, could be Caldwell's men. How did they get ahead of us? Lucille whispered. Must have split up to cover more ground, Sam replied grimly. We'll have to find another way around. They backtracked and headed east, following a game trail that wound through dense forest. The going was slow, with low-hanging branches forcing them to proceed carefully in the gathering darkness. There's an old trapper's cabin about 3 miles from here, Jake said. We could shelter there for the night, continue at first light. Sam nodded his agreement and they pressed on, the forest growing darker and more ominous around them. When they finally reached the cabin, it was little more than a ramshackle structure of logs and mud, but it offered protection from the elements and a place to rest undetected. While Jake tended to the horses, Sam gathered firewood and Lucille cleared years of debris from the small fireplace. Soon, a modest fire provided warmth and light, casting flickering shadows across the cabin's interior. We should reach Fort Laramie by tomorrow afternoon if we leave at dawn, Sam said, passing Lucille a tin cup of coffee. My friend there, Captain Daniels, served with me briefly during the war. He has connections with territorial judges. Lucille sipped the bitter coffee, grateful for its warmth. Do you really think we can win against Caldwell? He seems to have everyone in his pocket. Not everyone, Sam replied, his eyes meeting hers across the fire. Men like Caldwell always believe they're untouchable until someone proves them wrong. Your father may have been the first to stand against him, but he won't be the last. The mention of her father brought tears to Lucille's eyes. I miss him so much. He would have fought Caldwell with everything he had. Just like his daughter, Sam said softly. He reached out, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. The touch lingered, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her skin. For a moment, the danger they faced faded into the background as something unspoken passed between them. The moment was shattered by Jake bursting through the door, his expression urgent. Riders approaching, at least 4 of them moving slow like they're tracking. Sam was on his feet instantly. Put out the fire, we need to move. There's no time, Jake said grimly. They're too close. They'll see us if we try to run. Sam's mind raced, assessing their options. The cabin had only one entrance and no windows, making it both a refuge and a potential trap. Jake, take the horses deeper into the woods. Lucille and I will hold them off here. If we're not out by dawn, get to Fort Laramie and find Captain Daniels. Jake hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave them. Boss, go, Sam insisted. It's our best chance. After Jake slipped out, Sam quickly arranged their few supplies to create the impression of a longer stay. If it's Caldwell's men, they might believe we've been here for days, throw them off our trail. And if it's not Caldwell's men, Lucille asked, checking the rifle Sam had given her, then we apologize for the confusion and continue on our way. He positioned himself by the door, peering through a crack between the logs. They're coming closer. Extinguish the lantern. In the sudden darkness, the sounds from outside became more pronounced, hoofbeats approaching, men's voices, the jingle of spurs and tack. Sam's hand found Lucille's in the darkness, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Stay behind me, he whispered. If anything happens, run for the trees. Jake will find you. The riders stopped outside, their shadows visible through the cracks in the cabin walls. A voice called out, one that sent a chill down Lucille's spine. We know you're in there, Fletcher. Come out peaceful-like and nobody needs to get hurt. Vernon Caldwell had found them. Sam squeezed Lucille's hand once more before releasing it. "Stay back," he whispered, then raised his voice to address Caldwell. "What do you want, Caldwell?" "Just what's rightfully mine," Caldwell replied, his voice oily with false reasonableness. "The Andrews girl and compensation for my burned property." "Your property," Sam countered. "Funny, I don't recall seeing your name on the deed to my ranch." Caldwell's laugh was cold. "Not your ranch, Fletcher. Mine. Seems the fire at your place spread to my adjoining land, burned down a valuable storage barn." Sam exchanged a confused glance with Lucille in the darkness. Caldwell didn't own land near the Fletcher ranch. What was he playing at? "I'm a reasonable man," Caldwell continued. "Hand over the girl, pay for damages to my property, and you can ride away. No law involved." "And if I refuse," Caldwell's voice hardened. "Then we burn this place to the ground with you in it." "Your choice, Fletcher." Sam turned to Lucille, his voice barely audible. "He's lying about something. We need time to figure out what." "What are we going to do?" she whispered back. "Play for time," Sam replied. Then louder, "I need to confer with Miss Andrews, Caldwell. Give us a few minutes." "You've got 5 minutes, Fletcher. Then we start setting fires." Sam moved away from the door, guiding Lucille to the farthest corner of the cabin. "There's something not right about this. Caldwell doesn't own land near my ranch. He's making that up." "But why?" Lucille wondered. "What does he gain by lying about that?" Sam thought for a moment. "He's building a pretext. If he can make it seem like I destroyed his property, he can claim self-defense when he kills me." The realization hit Lucille like a physical blow. "He means to murder you and take me back to Timber Creek, where no one will question his story." "Exactly." Sam checked his revolver, counting the remaining bullets. "We have to find a way out of here." Outside, Caldwell's patience was wearing thin. "Time's up, Fletcher. What's it going to be?" Sam moved back to the door. "We need more time, Caldwell." "Fresh out of time," Caldwell snapped. "Boys, light it up." The smell of kerosene reached them moments before flames began licking at the exterior walls of the cabin. The dry, aged wood caught quickly, smoke seeping through the cracks between logs. "The roof," Sam said urgently, pointing upward. "It's our only chance." The cabin's roof was little more than branches and sod piled atop the log structure. Sam hoisted Lucille up, helping her push aside the rotting material. Smoke was filling the cabin now, making it difficult to breathe or see. "Go," Sam urged, boosting her through the opening they'd created. "I'll be right behind you." Lucille emerged onto the cabin's roof, the cool night air a blessed relief after the smoke-filled interior. Below, Caldwell and his men were focused on the door, not expecting an escape from above. Sam appeared beside her a moment later, his face blackened with soot. "When I say go, slide down the back and run for the trees," he whispered. "Don't look back, don't stop for anything." The flames were spreading rapidly, the heat becoming intense beneath their feet. Sam counted silently, waiting for the right moment when Caldwell's attention would be diverted. When one of the support beams inside crashed down with a thunderous noise, he gave the signal. Now, they slid down the rear slope of the roof and dropped to the ground, the impact jarring but not incapacitating. Without hesitation, they ran for the tree line, using the noise of the collapsing cabin to cover their footsteps. "They're escaping," someone shouted, followed by the crack of gunfire. Bullets splintered tree trunks around them as they zigzagged through the forest, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and their pursuers. The forest was pitch black, the moonlight unable to penetrate the dense canopy above. They stumbled over roots and crashed through underbrush, guided only by instinct and the desperate need to escape. Behind them, they could hear Caldwell's men crashing through the woods, their shouts growing fainter as the distance increased. After what seemed like hours of running, Sam pulled Lucille behind a massive fallen tree. Both were gasping for breath, their clothes torn and faces scratched from branches. "I think we lost them," Sam panted, straining to hear any sounds of pursuit. Lucille nodded, unable to speak through her exhaustion. They sat in silence for several minutes, recovering their strength and listening to the forest around them. Gradually, the normal sounds of night returned: the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. "What now?" Lucille finally whispered. "Jake's gone with the horses. We're on foot in the middle of nowhere." Sam looked up at the stars visible through gaps in the canopy, orienting himself. Fort Laramie is northeast of here. If we keep moving, we should reach it by tomorrow evening." "Do you think Jake made it?" Lucille asked, concern evident in her voice. "Jake knows these woods better than anyone. He'll be fine." Sam helped her to her feet. "We should keep moving. Caldwell won't give up easily." They traveled through the night, using the stars to guide them when visible and following flowing water when the forest canopy was too dense. By dawn, they had put several miles between themselves and the burning cabin, emerging from the forest onto rolling grassland that offered less concealment but easier travel. "We need to find water," Sam said, noting Lucille's exhaustion, "and somewhere to rest during the day. Traveling across open country in daylight is too risky." They followed a small stream to where it widened into a pool, sheltered by overhanging willows. After drinking their fill and washing the soot and dirt from their faces, they took inventory of their meager supplies: Sam's revolver with 4 remaining bullets, a small knife in Lucille's boot, and a handful of jerky in Sam's pocket. "Not much to work with," Lucille observed. "We've got the most important thing," Sam replied. "Each other." The simple statement hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Lucille looked away first, a flush coloring her cheeks that had nothing to do with their recent exertion. They rested through the hottest part of the day, taking turns keeping watch. As the sun began its descent, they prepared to continue their journey, the distant outline of Fort Laramie now visible on the horizon. "We should reach the fort by midnight," Sam said, helping Lucille to her feet. "Captain Daniels will offer us protection while we build our case against Caldwell." They had covered less than a mile when the sound of hoofbeats reached them. With no cover available, they dropped to the ground, pressing themselves flat against the earth and hoping the approaching riders would pass by without noticing them. The riders slowed as they neared, and Sam's grip tightened on his revolver. He was preparing to make a stand when a familiar voice called out. "Boss, Miss Andrews." "Is that you, Jake?" Lucille exclaimed, relief flooding through her as she recognized Sam's foreman. They stood, waving to attract attention. Jake wasn't alone. Riding beside him was a man in the uniform of a U.S. Army captain, Captain Daniels, Sam said as the riders approached. "You're a sight for sore eyes." The captain dismounted, clasping Sam's hand warmly. "When your man here rode in with a tale about Vernon Caldwell burning you out and chasing you through the territory, I gathered a patrol immediately. We've been searching since dawn." "Caldwell's not far behind us," Sam warned. "He's got at least 4 men with him." "Let him come," Daniels said grimly. "I've been wanting to have words with Caldwell for months. His land grabs have been causing trouble throughout the territory." With fresh horses provided by the patrol, they rode for Fort Laramie at a steady pace. Lucille found herself riding alongside Captain Daniels, who regarded her with curiosity. "Fletcher must think highly of you, Miss Andrews," the captain observed. "I've never known him to risk so much for anyone." "He's a good man," Lucille replied simply. "He didn't deserve to lose his home because of my troubles." Daniels smiled knowingly. "Sam's been my friend for many years. Trust me when I say he considers you worth far more than any house or ranch." Before Lucille could respond, a shout from the rear guard alerted them to riders approaching rapidly from behind. The patrol formed a defensive position, rifles ready. As Caldwell and his men rode into view, seeing the soldiers, Caldwell reined in sharply, his men following suit. His face contorted with rage when he spotted Lucille and Sam among the patrol. "This is a territorial matter, Captain," Caldwell called out. "That man is a fugitive from justice, and the woman is a debtor absconding with my property." Captain Daniels rode forward, his posture rigid with authority. "Funny, I've received no warrants regarding Samuel Fletcher, and people cannot be property, Mr. Caldwell. However, I do have numerous reports of you terrorizing settlers and manipulating loan agreements." "Lies," Caldwell spat. "I have documentation proving my claims." He reached into his coat, producing the loan agreement he'd been waving about since Jacob Andrews' death. "May I see that document?" Daniels requested, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Caldwell handed over the paper, confidence returning to his expression. "You'll see everything is in order, Captain. The Andrews girl owes me a considerable sum, which I've generously offered to forgive in exchange for her hand in marriage." Daniels examined the document carefully, then passed it to Sam. "What do you think, Fletcher? Your legal education might spot something I've missed." Sam studied the paper, paying particular attention to Jacob Andrews' signature. "This doesn't match the signatures I saw on file at the county records office," he said finally. "The formation of the J is different, and the stroke of the is too angular." "That's hardly proof," Caldwell scoffed. "People's signatures vary." "True," Sam agreed, "but there's something else." He pointed to the date on the document. "This loan was supposedly made 3 years ago, yet the paper stock bears a watermark from the Timber Creek paper mill, which only began operation last year." Caldwell's face drained of color as Captain Daniels took the document back, confirming Sam's observation. "It appears we have evidence of forgery, Mr. Caldwell. That's a serious offense in Wyoming Territory." "This is absurd," Caldwell blustered. "You can't possibly believe these baseless accusations over a respected businessman's word." "I believe in evidence," Daniels replied coldly. "And the evidence suggests you've been engaging in fraud, not to mention assault, arson, and attempted murder." He signaled to his men. "Mr. Caldwell, you and your associates are hereby detained pending an investigation into these matters." Caldwell's hand moved toward his weapon, but he froze at the sound of multiple rifles being cocked. Defeat replaced defiance in his eyes as he and his men were disarmed and placed under guard. "This isn't over," he growled as he was led away. "I have friends in high places." "So do I," Captain Daniels replied, "and mine uphold the law rather than subvert it." As they continued toward Fort Laramie, Lucille rode beside Sam, a weight lifting from her shoulders with each mile that separated them from Caldwell. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked. Sam considered her question carefully. Caldwell's influence runs deep in Timber Creek, but forgery is difficult to deny when the evidence is so clear. At minimum, he'll face a territorial judge and his reputation will be severely damaged. "What about my father's ranch?" "If we can prove the loan agreement was forged, your father's property should revert to you as his heir." Sam hesitated, then added, "Though I understand if you'd prefer not to return to Timber Creek after everything that's happened." The implication in his words was clear that she might have other options, other places to call home. Lucille studied his profile, seeing beyond the trail dust and exhaustion to the man who had risked everything to help her, a woman he barely knew when she arrived on his doorstep. "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Right now, I'm just grateful to be alive and to have met you." Sam's eyes met hers, a smile warming his features. "The feeling is mutual, Lucille Andrews." They reached Fort Laramie as night was falling, the garrison lanterns casting a welcoming glow. Captain Daniels escorted them to his quarters, where they were provided with hot meals, clean clothes, and separate rooms to rest. Despite her exhaustion, Lucille found sleep elusive. The events of the past days played through her mind the terror of the cabin burning around them, the desperate flight through the forest, and throughout it all, Sam's unwavering presence. She had known him only a few weeks, yet he had become central to her world in ways she was only beginning to understand. A gentle knock at her door roused her from these thoughts. Opening it, she found Sam standing in the hallway, similarly unable to find rest. "I hope I didn't wake you," he said. "I just wanted to check that you were comfortable." "I'm fine," she assured him, "just processing everything." Sam nodded in understanding. "It's been quite an ordeal." "Thank you," Lucille said suddenly, "for everything you've done. You could have turned me away when I first arrived or handed me over to Caldwell later. Instead, you lost your home protecting me." "A home can be rebuilt," Sam replied softly, "and I would make the same choice again without hesitation." The sincerity in his voice stirred something deep within Lucille. On impulse, she stepped forward and kissed his cheek, a brief but tender gesture of gratitude that somehow conveyed more than words could express. When she stepped back, Sam was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. For a moment, it seemed he might pull her into his arms, but instead he simply said, "Good night, Lucille. Tomorrow we begin setting things right." The investigation into Vernon Caldwell's activities proceeded swiftly. Captain Daniels had telegraphed the territorial governor, who dispatched a judge to Fort Laramie to hear the evidence. Other victims of Caldwell's schemes came forward, emboldened by the prospect of justice. 3 days after their arrival at the fort, Lucille and Sam stood before Judge William Harrington, presenting their case. The judge examined the forged loan agreement, comparing it with authentic documents bearing Jacob Andrews' signature. His conclusion was unequivocal. "This is clearly a forgery," he declared, "and a poor one at that. Mr. Caldwell, you are hereby charged with fraud, forgery, arson, assault, and attempted murder. You will be held at Fort Laramie until your trial, which I expect will result in a lengthy prison sentence." Caldwell, his arrogance finally broken, could only watch in defeated silence as his empire of deception crumbled around him. After the hearing, Lucille found herself standing on the fort's ramparts, gazing toward the distant mountains. Sam joined her, leaning against the wooden railing beside her. "Judge Harrington has declared your father's property legally yours," he said. "You can return to Timber Creek whenever you're ready." Lucille nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. "My father always said the ranch was his dream, not mine. I stayed because he needed me, but now." "Now you're free to pursue your own dreams," Sam finished for her. "Yes," she turned to face him fully. "Though I'm not entirely sure what those are yet." Sam took her hand, his touch gentle yet somehow grounding. "You don't have to decide immediately. My offer of employment still stands if you want it, though." He hesitated, a rare uncertainty crossing his features. "I hope you might consider staying for reasons beyond employment." Lucille's heart quickened at his words. "What reasons might those be, Mr. Fletcher?" "Personal ones," he replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "In the short time I've known you, Lucille Andrews, you've become more important to me than I ever expected. The thought of you returning to Timber Creek or going anywhere else, well, it doesn't sit right." "Are you asking me to stay with you, Sam?" "I'm asking for a chance," he said simply. "A chance to rebuild together. My ranch needs restoring and your father's property needs managing. We could help each other, and perhaps in time." He didn't finish the thought, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear in his eyes, in the way he held her hand as though it were something precious. "I'd like that," Lucille said softly. "A new beginning." As the sun set over the Wyoming Territory, casting the fort in golden light, Sam Fletcher leaned forward and kissed Lucille Andrews for the first time, a promise of new beginnings, of healing, and of a love born in adversity but destined to flourish in peace. 1 month later, Lucille stood on the newly constructed porch of Sam's rebuilt ranch house, watching as a wagon loaded with lumber approached. The past weeks had been a flurry of activity rebuilding what Caldwell had destroyed, making plans for the future, and coming to terms with the past. Sam had hired a crew of skilled workers who had made short work of raising a new home, larger and more comfortable than the original. Lucille had thrown herself into the process, designing the interior layout and choosing furnishings that blended Sam's tastes with her own. Another delivery. Sam asked, joining her on the porch after finishing his work in the barn. "The last of the wood for the furniture," Lucille confirmed. "The carpenter says your desk will be ready by week's end." Sam nodded approvingly. "Just in time for the new breeding records I need to compile." He slipped an arm around her waist, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Have you decided what to do about your father's ranch?" Lucille leaned into his embrace. "I've been thinking about that. What would you say to expanding your operation? With both properties combined, we could build something truly remarkable." "Ambitious," Sam commented with a smile. "I like it." Their relationship had deepened with each passing day, moving from mutual respect to genuine affection and finally to a love neither had expected to find. They hadn't rushed, both understanding the value of building something lasting on a foundation of trust and shared purpose. As the wagon pulled up to the house, Jake emerged from the barn to help with unloading. The foreman had become even more indispensable during the rebuilding process, his loyalty to Sam extending naturally to include Lucille. "Sheriff Riley's riding in," Jake announced, nodding toward the road where a single rider approached. Since Caldwell's arrest, Timber Creek had begun the slow process of emerging from his shadow. Sheriff Riley, freed from Caldwell's influence, had renewed his commitment to upholding the law impartially. His occasional visits to the Fletcher Ranch were a welcome connection to the wider community. "Afternoon, folks," Riley called out as he dismounted. "Place is looking mighty fine." "Thanks to a lot of hard work," Sam replied, shaking the sheriff's hand. "What brings you out this way?" Riley removed his hat, revealing a rare smile. "Got news from the territorial capital. Caldwell's trial concluded yesterday, guilty on all counts. Judge sentenced him to 15 years in Laramie Penitentiary. Relief washed over Lucille. Despite the evidence against him, a part of her had feared Caldwell might somehow escape justice. It's really over then." "As over as it gets," Riley confirmed. "His assets are being divided among those he defrauded. There's a share coming to you, Miss Andrews, as compensation for your father's property." "We'll put it to good use," Sam said, his hand finding Lucille's. After delivering his news, Riley stayed for dinner, sharing stories of Timber Creek's gradual transformation. When he departed, Lucille and Sam returned to the porch, watching as twilight settled over the land that had become their shared domain. "I've been thinking," Sam said after a comfortable silence. "This house is nearly complete. The ranch is functioning again. It seems like the right time to consider the future." "Oh," Lucille turned to him, curious about his tone. Sam took both her hands in his expression more serious than she'd seen it in weeks. "Lucille Andrews, when you rode onto my property that morning, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. I thought I was content with my books and my solitude, but now I can't imagine returning to that existence." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, producing a small silver ring adorned with a single pearl. "This was my mother's. She gave it to me before I left Boston, saying I should offer it only to a woman who made me feel truly alive." Lucille's breath caught as Sam knelt before her, the ring glinting in the last light of day. "I love you, Lucille. Will you marry me and build a life here, creating something that's truly ours?" Tears of joy filled Lucille's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Samuel Fletcher. Yes, with all my heart." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to seal their engagement with a kiss, Lucille marveled at how the darkest moment of her life, the loss of her father and home, had ultimately led her to the greatest happiness she had ever known. Together, they would create something neither could have built alone, a legacy of love, strength, and perseverance in the untamed heart of Wyoming Territory. Their wedding took place the following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the meadows surrounding the ranch. Friends from throughout the territory gathered to witness their union, from Captain Daniels, who had helped bring Caldwell to justice, to the ranch hands and townspeople who had supported their rebuilding efforts. Under a canopy of blue sky, Lucille and Sam exchanged vows that acknowledged their difficult beginnings, but focused on the promise of their shared future. As the territorial minister pronounced them husband and wife, a sense of rightness settled over Lucille. This was where she belonged, with this man on this land. The years that followed brought challenges, as frontier life always did, but also immeasurable joy. The combined Andrews-Fletcher Ranch prospered under their joint management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Their methods were innovative, blending Sam's education with Lucille's practical knowledge of ranch life. 2 years after their wedding, Lucille gave birth to a daughter they named Emily, after Sam's mother. 3 years later, a son they called Jacob, honoring the father Lucille had lost. The children grew strong in the clear mountain air, learning to ride almost before they could walk, absorbing their parents' values of honesty, hard work, and compassion. Timber Creek transformed as well, growing from a frontier outpost into a thriving community. When Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, Sam was elected to the first state legislature, where he worked to ensure that the rights and interests of small ranchers were protected. Lucille managed their growing enterprise during his absences, proving herself as capable a businesswoman as she was a partner and mother. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Sam surprised Lucille with a special gift, a journal he had kept since the day she arrived at his ranch. In it, he had recorded not only the dramatic events of their early days together, but also the quiet moments that had cemented their bond. The final entry, dated on their anniversary, contained a simple message. 10 years ago, you changed my life. Every day since has been a blessing beyond measure. As they stood together on their porch that evening, watching their children play in the yard where once there had been only ashes, Lucille reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate young woman fleeing a predator, she had become a respected rancher's wife, a mother, and a pillar of her community. The pain of her father's death would always remain, but it had been transformed into something meaningful, a legacy of resilience that she passed on to her children. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Sam asked, his arm around her waist as familiar and comforting as ever. Lucille smiled up at him, the love between them as strong as the day he had proposed. "I was thinking about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best ones. If Caldwell hadn't locked me in that barn, if you hadn't threatened to burn his shame down, we might never have found each other." Sam chuckled at the memory. "I was bluffing, you know. I had no intention of actually setting fire to anything." "I know," Lucille replied with a laugh. "But it was quite effective, and very romantic in a Wild West sort of way." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they shared a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their first, yet deepened by years of shared triumphs and trials. Their story, which had begun in fear and desperation, had transformed into one of the greatest love stories the Wyoming Territory had ever known, a testament to courage, integrity, and the enduring power of love to build something beautiful from the ashes of adversity. In the years that followed, the Fletcher Ranch became a haven for others seeking a fresh start. Lucille never forgot what it felt like to arrive desperate at a stranger's door, and she ensured that those in similar circumstances found help when they reached the Fletcher land. Their home became known throughout the territory as a place where justice prevailed and compassion ruled. Sam and Lucille Fletcher lived to see their children grow into adults who carried forward their values. Emily became a schoolteacher, educating the next generation of Wyoming citizens, while Jacob expanded the ranch his parents had built, incorporating modern practices while maintaining their commitment to fair dealing. When visitors asked Lucille the secret to their successful marriage and thriving ranch, she would smile and say simply, "We built it together, through fire and storm, never forgetting that the greatest treasures are those we cannot hold in our hands: love, trust, and the courage to stand for what's right, no matter the cost." And so their legacy continued, a love story born in the wild heart of Wyoming Territory, where a desperate young woman found salvation in the courage of a cowboy who recognized her worth and fought for their chance at happiness against all odds.